Stand there. Good morning. Merci tout le monde d'être ici pour une conférence de presse sur un enjeu tellement important. I'm here as leader of the Green Party of Canada, Elizabeth May, with my parliamentary colleague, Mike Morrice, MP for Kitchener Centre, honored to join representatives of Prevent Cancer Now. I'm going to ask them to present first. The topic for concern today is why the Government of Canada doesn't regulate the safety of our drinking water in relation to asbestos getting into our drinking water from contaminated water pipes. I'm going to start, we're honored to be joined here by Dr. Meg Sears and Julian Branch, Prevent Cancer Now. I'm going to step back and ask Julian Branch to explain the issue first, followed by Dr. Meg Sears.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and good morning, everyone. I'm from Regina, Saskatchewan, and I'm going to talk about the situation in that city. First, I want to let you know that asbestos cement pipes deliver water to millions of Canadians on a daily basis. I discovered this issue in 2012, and I discovered that Regina, Saskatchewan has 600 kilometers of asbestos cement water pipes. I also discovered that in 2003, the National Research Council opened a $34 million research facility in Regina, Saskatchewan to study asbestos cement water pipes. Those studies found, and 10 studies, by the way, found that the pipes deteriorate over time and the asbestos does enter the water. The studies found that the asbestos in the water causes a health concern, quote unquote. That's the NRC. One 2010 study in particular says that when the asbestos fibers enter the water, they pose a hazard of cancer. In 2008, the federal government boasted about the research being done in Regina on asbestos cement pipes and promised a guidance document on asbestos cement water pipes. The Center for Sustainable Infrastructure Research closed its doors years ago. We have never seen a guidance document on asbestos cement pipes. Where is that guidance document? Between 2010 and 2022, there were 2,477 asbestos cement water pipe breaks in the city of Regina. City of Regina does not test for asbestos at water breaks, and it does not tell residents what type of pipe was involved in the break. That is a huge problem. Federal government needs to finish the job it started at that National Research Center in Regina and find out why there is a health concern associated with ingested asbestos. Canadians have a right when they turn on their tap to get clean drinking water. When they use a shower, when they use a humidifier, they have a right to know that that water is safe and free of asbestos. The federal government needs to regulate asbestos in water. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julian. I'm Dr. Meg Sears. I lead Prevent Cancer Now, and we aim to stop cancer before it starts. In Canada, we're seeing increasing numbers of cancers in younger and younger Canadians. And there are quite a few possibilities for what might be causing that. But we know now that there are hundreds of thousands of kilometers of asbestos, of pipes that contain asbestos, a known human carcinogen. These pipes are carrying drinking water to millions of Canadians. And Canada does not so much as measure asbestos in drinking water. When we're told by Health Canada that there is no evidence of harm from asbestos in drinking water, it is not because we have evidence of no harm, it's because we have no evidence whatsoever. In Canada, there is no laboratory with an accredited method to measure asbestos in water. If you get your blood drawn at a lab, you know that there's a lot of science that goes behind the methods. There's a lot of double checking that's done. Laboratories have to check between different labs to make sure that results are correct. And in Canada, we have none of that. In the US, they do. And on the basis of their data, back in 1992, they regulated asbestos. So what we're seeing is that in younger and younger Canadians, we're seeing more and more cancers of the abdomen, cancers of the stomach, of the colorectal. And we don't know why. And Canada's answer to this has been to screen more. They think that catching cancer earlier is going to be the answer. But stopping cancer before it starts by eliminating a known carcinogen in our drinking water that is not even measured in Canada is one very prudent way to do it. Not only would it protect public health, but as Julian has mentioned, these pipes are breaking in increasing numbers, increasingly frequently. So we're dealing with a public health emergency, but we're also dealing with an infrastructure emergency that is routinely almost happening in some cities. And instead of systematically fixing the problem, it's being dealt with on emergency basis very inefficiently and very expensively. So we have, from a governance and from public health point of view, there are very good reasons to be addressing the fact that Canada has many, many asbestos cement water pipes that are old. We're no longer installing them, and they're a health hazard, definitely. And we need to join with the US and researchers around the world who are calling out that swallowing asbestos is just as bad as inhaling it. Canada regulates inhalation of asbestos, and at the same time, we say it's fine to drink it. We don't believe that, and so we call for regulation and action on this aging infrastructure. Thank you very much. We look forward to questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. Un moment, s'il vous plaît. Je vais ajouter quelques mots selon le Parti vert du Canada. I don't know that many Canadians recognize or know that there is no safety regulation of drinking water in this country. So we know that there's unsafe drinking water in many First Nations communities, but for Canadians, no matter where you live, the federal government, Health Canada, does not regulate the safety of drinking water. They issue guidelines. So in this case, the US government, as you've heard from Dr. Sears, regulates how much asbestos is legally allowed in drinking water. The US government recently issued new regulations on the number and the amount of allowable per and polychloroalkyl substances, the so-called PFAS forever chemicals. Canada doesn't. Canada doesn't regulate the safety of our drinking water. Dans cette cas, je suis tellement, j'ai beaucoup d'inquiétudes parce que nous avons beaucoup de preuves que les fibres amiantes sont dangereuses dans l'atmosphère et aussi dangereux dans notre eau. Il n'y a pas une seule réglementation ici au Canada pour protéger la santé publique avec les menaces comme Dr. Sears et Julian Branch a déjà dit, les menaces de notre infrastructure très ancienne avec la contamination des fibres amiantes. Nous sommes disponibles pour les questions en anglais ou en français. We are demanding now that the ministry, that the government, that the Department of Health and that the Infrastructure Department pay attention to this large ongoing infrastructure debt, and that the government of Canada, particularly Health Canada, start paying attention to having binding regulations to ensure that our drinking water isn't causing an increase in cancer. Merci.
Hey, Max Paris with CDC. If you'll indulge me, I promised to ask questions about asbestos, but I've been asked by my colleagues back at the shop to ask you a couple of questions about foreign interference. As I understand it, you have top secret clearance. Are you interested in reading an unredacted version of the NSCOP report?
I have asked to be able to do that, yes. I've spoken with Minister Dominic LeBlanc, and reminded him that I do have top secret security clearance. Unlike the leader of the Conservative Party, I asked for it, I received it. I'm horrified to imagine that my sitting colleagues in the House of Commons can have served the interests of foreign governments. I think Canadians need to know, we all take an oath of office that says that our allegiance is to Canada. I'm horrified to imagine that we are, at this point, still don't know who these people are within our ranks, who have been alleged to have put the interests of foreign governments ahead of their own government. This needs to be thoroughly investigated. And because I do have top secret security clearance, I've asked to look at the unredacted copy of all documents related to this serious set of allegations. Well, Minister LeBlanc says I absolutely will be able to, because I have top secret security clearance.
And do you know when you're going to be able to read this, or?
I hope as soon as possible. I'm certainly prepared I'll drop everything at a moment's notice and read whatever is put in front of me. And again, top secret security clearance does place on me an obligation not to reveal anything that is top secret, but certainly I want to share with Canadians whatever I'm legally allowed to share. And in the meantime, I agree with other party leaders in the House of Commons that we should know who is subject to these allegations, bearing in mind, and I think we quite often lately seem to skip over this, that there is a presumption of innocence in our criminal justice system. We don't want anything that Parliament is demanding or that politicians are demanding to interfere with the criminal justice process or with investigations that are ongoing. I'll be in a much better position to know if that's the case after I've reviewed all the documents. But I do think Canadians need to know which MPs are suspected by our intelligence agencies of what is essentially, I mean, I saw Wesley Wark's comments in the media, this is textbook treason. I agree.
Do you think the politicizing of this issue does to the Canadian public's trust in politicians?
Well, the Canadian public's trust in politicians, I think, rates somewhere below what they think about the paparazzi or used car salesman. So I don't think we are a trusted group of people. So no, I don't think so. I think you're still held, at least we hold you in very high regard in the Green Party. It's a horrific revelation that any member of Parliament would place foreign interests or their own ability to advance their career by getting the help, assistance in any way, shape, or form of foreign government. It's, for me, as someone who lives and works in this world, takes a lot to find myself shocked. I am shocked. I want to get to the bottom of this. And I think Canadians deserve to know. And if we are to ever earn the respect of Canadians again, we only do so by showing that we work hard for Canadians, not for foreign interests. Do you want to add anything, Mike?
Well, I mean, just briefly, Max, to say that it is an opportunity to remove the partisanship and actually build trust in our democracy, which is why, again, Elizabeth having top secret clearance and being able to properly review the document would put us as Greens in a position to comment more fulsomely. And that's how parliamentarians should be conducting themselves, with the interest of Canadians at the center, and by doing that, building trust in the process.
Like I said, I do have some asbestos questions. Didn't realize that there were asbestos cement pipes in delivering our water anywhere in this country. You, Dr. Sears, you suggested that there's like hundreds of thousands of kilometers. I know that, sorry, I've forgotten your name.
Julian Branch.
Julian, Mr. Branch, that there's over 300 kilometers in Regina alone.
Yeah.
When were these put in? And Dr. Sears said that we're not using this anymore, but like, when were these put in? And
I can break it down for you a bit if you'd like. 600 kilometers in Regina, over 700 in Winnipeg, over 1,000 in Edmonton, predominantly in Western Canada for some reason. They were installed between 1940s to the early 1990s.
And what do? Do they just like mix this asbestos into the mortar, or is it a layer of asbestos that's sandwiched in there?
There are those pipes that are wrapped in asbestos. That's not what we're talking about. This is mixed in with the cement as a binding agent to hold it together. 20%, the National Research Council studies will show you that approximately 20% of that pipe is made up of asbestos, and they deteriorate over time. And when they break, the fibers go into the water, posing a health concern.
No, obviously. But this, I mean, if in fact there are hundreds of thousands of kilometers of this or pardon me, not hundreds, well, thousands of kilometers of these types of pipes in Western Canada or other parts of Canada, that's like a huge expense to replace, right? No?
It's going to be expensive, but that's no reason not to look at this. It's not just Canada, by the way. These pipes are around the world. They were created by an Italian around the turn of the last century. Europe's full of them. Australia, give you an idea of your cost question. Australia has 40,000 kilometers of asbestos cement pipe. They estimate it will cost $8 billion to replace them. Australia has an asbestos eradication agency set up to look at this issue.
What kind of, I mean, I'm familiar with the idea of the inhalation of asbestos dust, but what's the word, ingestion, of asbestos particles, like, are there any studies that have been done on that? Or
the United States studied this for 20 years before they regulated in 92, and I can tell you the rationale that the US EPA uses. When you inhale asbestos, the first thing you will do, clear your throat. You've just ingested asbestos. But I can get Meg to explain more on the science behind that.
Yes, absolutely. When you inhale asbestos, you then sort of regurgitate a little bit of it in sputum, and then you swallow that. We know that even for workers exposed to asbestos dust, there's greater frequencies of cancers in the kidney, in the stomach, and in the liver, for instance. We've even seen asbestos fibers in liver bile duct cancers. So they've actually visualized the presence of asbestos fibers in these cancers. These cancers just so happen to be increasing in Canadians, particularly in younger Canadians. And we don't have an explanation for this. So, you know, there are other possibilities, but, you know, the fact that we've got, as these age, these pipes shed more and more quickly the asbestos into the drinking water. For instance, here in Ottawa, there's a great stretch of kilometers of asbestos cement pipes, and it ends at a school. So, you know, all along the length of that pipe, as the water flows through it, there's going to be a buildup of the asbestos, and the major draw from that pipe is actually a school. So, you know, you can talk about in generalities about across the country, we have this many kilometers and so on. But then when you drill down and you see, oh, you know, these children, first thing on Monday morning, they're going to have a good slug of asbestos coming out of this pipe that was less used over the weekend, for instance. This has been seen with lead. We know that we've had similar problems with water going through lead pipes because it kind of builds up over time. But in Canada, we're told, well, we don't have evidence that there is an association between exposure to asbestos in water and the development of these cancers. But in Canada, we don't do that measurement.
Can I just add? It's a very clear way for a government to say we have no evidence that there's a health hazard from whatever. We have no evidence that there's a real health danger from asbestos in our drinking water. You'll never get the evidence if you don't measure, you don't study, and you don't check. We need to have the same kind of focus that the US government has with an asbestos eradication agency. And at a minimum, we should start testing drinking water for levels of asbestos, and then we could identify the hotspot communities where the priority is to remove those pipes more quickly than maybe another community where you don't find as much asbestos in the drinking water. We have ways to prioritize, but what we must not do is ignore the issue, decide never to measure, never to study, and never to regulate.
Ms. Branch, what do you think? I mean, I know that you want to see this study that was never done or never released, but beyond that, what do you want to see done here?
Well, right now, there is a parliamentary petition that has called on the government to take action, and the government has agreed to conduct an inventory of asbestos cement pipes across Canada. It's the first time it's ever happened. That's a good first step. We have to find out where the pipes are and what condition they're in. And the government is currently reassessing its 1989 decision not to regulate. That decision was made in 1989. They've conducted assessments in 2005, 2013, 2018. They've looked at the US EPA information and have come to the same conclusion time after time, that there's no consistent, convincing evidence that ingested asbestos is hazardous. I find that extraordinarily curious. And yes, I would like to see that guidance document that was promised by the federal government back in 2008. Jim Prentice was the minister at the time, and he boasted about the good work that was coming out of that Regina Research Center and promised a guidance document. Where is it?
Just to be clear, we're not actually installing asbestos cement.
We are not
pipes
installing
anymore,
asbestos
right?
cement.
When did they stop doing that?
The latest I've heard was Winnipeg in the early 1990s. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Just a brief connection that you may have seen in the House of Commons last week when the Minister of Health was in front of parliamentarians to be answering questions. When it comes to rare cancers, we also have the issue of some drugs not being covered. And as Greens, we've been calling for that to be addressed. In my case, I have a constituent, a young mom who has a rare liver cancer. The drug that she needs has been approved by Health Canada already, but has not been recommended by the Canadian Drug Agency for public coverage. And as a result, her family started a GoFundMe account in order to pay for this drug that her oncologist has recommended, which will prolong her life. She has a terminal diagnosis. This drug would prolong her life. And one of the reasons why it's not available to her as paid for through Ontario Health is because the CDA hasn't recommended it. And so this is the reality for those across the country who are living with cancer and getting cancer diagnoses, that more also needs to be done to ensure we have proper coverage of drugs for rare cancers. And we're going to continue to call for that. Got a constructive response from the Minister of Health on this, and we're urging him to urge the CDA to re-review this drug for public coverage.
Are there questions online? No, there's not. Okay, good. Go ahead, Meg.
Yeah. I just wanted to add one point to what Mr. Branch has put forward, and that is that generally the Government of Canada conducts public consultations and there's public participation when we reassess chemicals. So Prevent Cancer Now has been very engaged under the Canadian Environmental Protection Act on assessments of many chemicals. And remarkably, Health Canada claims to have done reassessments, and there has been no public participation, not so much as notification that they have reassessed, in quotes, pre-existing literature. And in fact, the final assessment includes the same literature as the same reference list as the 1989 document that is online. So we are not seeing that Health Canada is really robustly addressing all of the most recent literature. They're now referring to a WHO document, which is also quite incomplete in terms of a complete review of the medical literature.
If I just close on one point, is that in the last couple of days alone, I'm introduced, some time ago, I introduced the petition that Mr. Branch referenced already, where the response from the government was that they're going to put together an inventory. We're calling for regulation for safety of our drinking water, to regulate asbestos in drinking water. This week also presented a petition on behalf of constituents calling for banning a very common herbicide that's a probable human carcinogen, according to the International Agency for Research on Cancer, glyphosate. Looking at the perchlor and polychloralkyl substances I mentioned before, the forever chemicals that the International Association of Firefighters is asking Canada to regulate. My colleague, Adam Olson, who's a British Columbia Green Party MLA, has introduced a private member's bill to get these forever chemicals out of firefighter equipment. My only point is that when you look across our society and the world in which we live, we are in a chemical soup of toxics, some of which are already identified as human carcinogens. And we are much more focused on treatment of cancer, early diagnosis, and so on. And for good reason. Finding a cure for cancer, treatment, absolutely. But it's not just an old adage or truism. It's actually true. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That's why we stand with Prevent Cancer Now and saying, get toxic herbicides and pesticides out of our immediate environment. Act to regulate asbestos. Get toxic chemicals out of our day-to-day lives, out of our amniotic fluids where embryonic human babies are growing. We can eliminate toxic chemical and other carcinogenic exposures in our lives. But there happens to be some big money behind making those chemicals. And there happens to be a big money cost to eliminating those old, deteriorating, asbestos-contaminated concrete pipes. And in a question between money and health, we've got to come down hard on the side of protecting the health of Canadians from increased cancer risks from avoidable substances. Merci.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Or you can take water.